All right, so what we want to do is we talked about two different forms of a parabola. Sorry, I had to think for a second. We talked about vertex form, and then we talked about standard form. When you are writing an equation of a parabola given a vertex and a point, we're going to use vertex form. So just a reminder, that was f of x equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. Okay, that's in function form. But what is it that we talked about multiple times? What is f of x the same thing as y? So technically we can also look at it like this. Okay. We're going to be using this form of it to help us write an equation. So let's talk about the vertex. What two letters represent the vertex? We called them what two letters? H and K. So in my vertex, my letters are H and K. And then an ordered pair or a point, what would be those two variables? X and Y, right? X comes first, Y comes second. So if you look at our equation in vertex form, y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, and my vertex is represented by h and k, and my point is represented by x and y. So if you look at that equation, what variable do we not know? We know h, we know k, we know x, we know y. What other variables in that thing? A. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to use h and k and x and y to find a, so that we can then write our equation. Okay, so what we're going to do is, looking at our letters, I'll have them labeled. Our vertex 3 and 4 is H and K, so H is 3, K is 4. And then our ordered pair, X is 2, Y is 3. We're going to plug those into this equation. Okay, so starting with Y, the Y value that I have is 3, equals, we don't know A, that's what we're trying to figure out, parentheses, my x value I have labeled as 2, minus my h value, which is a 3, squared, and then plus my k value, which is 4. So I'm plugging in the h, I'm plugging in the k, I'm plugging in the x, I'm plugging in the y. What we need to do now is we need to solve this equation for a. Think about order of operations, what has to come first? Parentheses. So let's work inside of our parentheses first. What's 2 minus 3? Negative 1. Okay. And then we do what comes after parentheses? Exponents, right? What's negative 1 squared? 1. Okay. Then I go do my multiplication, which the only multiplication I have is a times 1, which is just a. And then how would I solve that for a? Yeah, I'm going to subtract the 4 over. 3 minus 4 is negative 1, is equal to a. Anybody have any questions on that so far? All right. So now what we do is we're going to use, again, that vertex form. We're going to put the variable y and the variable x back in. But we're going to plug in the a that we have and the h and the k that we have. Okay. When we write our equation, we always want the variable y and the variable x to stay variables. We just had to use them in the first place to find a. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to keep it y equals, what did we say a was? Negative 1. So we can put a negative 1 or you can just put a negative, either way. Then we're going to put our variable back in, x. What was our h value? 3. Okay. Squared. And then plus, what was our k value? 4. Okay, so you could also, again, you could write it like this. You don't have to put the 1 there. You could just put a negative out front. And then it doesn't specify how we need to leave the equation. It doesn't say vertex form or standard form. So guess what? Vertex form is the easiest one. So I'm going to leave my answer either like that or like this. We don't have to work it out and simplify it any further. Yes, ma'am. Because when we write our equation, every equation has to have an x variable and a y variable. So in the first part, I used those so that I could find a, but then when I write the equation after I find a, we want to put the variables back in. Does that make a little bit of sense? Sort of, kind of? Okay, let's try another one. We'll do another one together, and then I'll let you try one. All right, here's the next vertex and point. I'm going to write down the information, and then we will start working through it. All right, so I'm just going to write the vertex form up top again just so that we have it to look at. It's y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And what variables again do my vertex represent? H and k. And then my ordered pair represents x and y. So again, we're going to just start plugging everything in. And if I were you, I would put the letters H and K under my vertex and the letters X and Y under my point so that I don't get confused on what I'm actually plugging in. So we start with Y, which we have labeled as -4, equals. We don't know A, that's what we're trying to find out. Then we have our X, which is -2, minus our H value, which is a -3. And then plus my K value, but my K value happens to be what this time? Negative, so I'm just going to write it as a minus instead of a plus and negative. Again, we plug in the H and the K, which is our vertex. We plug in the X and the Y, which is our ordered pair. We're going to solve for A, and then we go back and write the equation, plugging the variables X and Y back in. Starting inside your parentheses. First of all, -2 minus a negative turns what? Plus. So that's -2 plus 3, which is how much? 1. Okay. Then we're going to do our exponents. What is 1 squared? 1. Then we multiply. And I know some of you can probably do some of this in like one step instead of writing everything out. I'm just showing you my work. A times 1 is A. And then how would I solve that for A? Plus 5. And so A is going to equal 1. And then we're going to go back to the equation. We're going to put the variable y and the variable x back in. We're going to keep the h and the k as numbers, and we're going to plug the a in as a number. So it's going to be y equals, my a value was 1, then the x, minus a -3 turns to +3, and then minus 5. And you can leave it like that if you want. Or because a is 1, we technically don't really have to write it there. If we don't write it, we know there's a 1 there. So either one of those would be the equation for the parabola that goes through -2, -4, and has a vertex of -3, -5.
Why does it say x yet it's but it was -2?
So you're talking about over here when I'm writing it in the paper? Yeah. So in the parentheses, it's x minus h. So I'm using the -3 for that. Does that make sense? All right, I want you guys to try this one. All right, again, our vertex is represented by the letters H and K. The ordered pair is represented by the letters x and y. We're going to plug those into our vertex form. So y is -1. We don't know a. X is 2 minus h, which is 4, squared, plus k, but k happens to be a negative, so I'm going to write it as a minus. What's -4 or 2 minus 4? -2. Okay. And if I square -2, that gives me 4. So I had a couple of questions at this point. Okay, I've been putting a dot next to the a. You can put parentheses if you want to, but that a gets multiplied by whatever the result is from inside your parentheses squared. So before I start moving things, I'm going to write it like this. It's going to be just 4a. That's how we write 4 times a, right? Okay. Then we can continue to solve by adding my 3. Let's see. -1 plus 3 is 2 equals 4a. Then I'm going to get the 4 away from the a. However, 4 does not go into 2 evenly, but it does reduce to be what? 1/2. So a is 1/2 here. Is everybody okay with that part? Right, then we're going to plug it back in. Again, the variable y goes in. I plug in the value of a that I found. The variable of x goes back in, but we're keeping the numerical value for h, and we're keeping the numerical value for k. The only variables that get plugged back in the end are x and y. Everything else stays a value. Everybody kind of okay with that? Sure? Let's see what we got. All right, try this last one. All right, so again, the vertex is h and k. The ordered pair is x and y. We're plugging that into our vertex form, so y is 3. We don't know a. X is -3. H is 0. K is also 0. So inside my parentheses, first, what's -3 minus 0? Okay. And -3 squared is 9. So I've got 3, equals a times 9 is 9a. Do I really need that plus 0 on the end? No. And then to solve that for a, I'm going to get rid of the 9. 9 does not divide into 3 evenly, but it does reduce to be 1/3. So then we go back. Again, our variable y goes in. The value of a that we found goes in. The variable x goes in. The h stays numerical, and so does the k. That is technically the correct answer, but is there a little bit more simple way we could write that? In my parentheses, if I have x minus 0, does that change? That's just what? Just x, right? Whoops. So we could technically just write it like this. You don't even have to do the -0 or the +0. You can, and it is 100% correct. However, if you see something like that one, and they could even write it without the parentheses, it would also be the same. Okay, any one of those three are the equivalent form of the same equation. It's just when subtracting 0 and adding 0 doesn't change anything, so therefore you technically don't have to have it. But again, if you leave your answer like this one, that is 100% correct, and that is perfectly fine. You don't have to simplify it any further if you don't want to. Does anybody have any questions on how this works? All right.